Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sanctuary Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Barrow from SealSanctuary.com. And with me today is Ron Lipbach, old friend of the pod. How you doing, Ron?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you guys doing?
Great. I guess the big news of this week with the Steelers is the signing of Cordero Patterson. Um, you know me, I've been
This has been
pushing this
in
team.
the
This
making for you.
this has been my guy for like 3 years running now, so they
Yeah,
finally did it. Hopefully, it's not too late. He just turned 33 this year, so
yeah.
they're not getting the best Cordero Patterson they could have if they had signed him a couple of years ago. But
I hope there's. I don't think there's a lot of mileage on him. I mean, in the sense that, like, he's kind of more of a specialist, and so hopefully he has not too much wear and tear on the guy. It's gonna be fun to see what they do with him.
sounds like they signed him for the kickoff return with the new kickoff rules more than anything else. And then
Yeah,
he can be the third string running back at the same time too. So it's going to be interesting this kickoff rule because they adopted the XFL's version of it where you're 5 yards apart or 10 yards apart and you can't move till the ball passes the 20. This should be interesting.
yeah. I think they're the whole thing was trying to avoid those big collisions. I
Yep.
remember speaking to guys who were like the big gunner guy or the big guys who would just like run downfield and just knock each other out, and that those days are over. Orpheus Roy was big with that. I
I
remember
was going to
that.
bring up his name. Do you
Yeah.
remember him doing the
Yeah, he when I talked to him, he said
300
like
pounds?
he he said he was the guy that everyone feared, and then one day he got knocked out and everyone made fun of him for it. He said he was like the one doing all the damage. But yeah, those days are done,
Yeah.
for the most part. So it'll be interesting to see how Quirrell does with this offense, and with this special team stuff, and maybe a little bit on the offense. I don't know. I think there's elevated, probably unrealistic expectations of him on the offense, but
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see.
I do hope they carve out some kind of niche for him, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't expect anything crazy, especially since I was looking at his snaps by position today, and it's mostly been running back. So he's done a little wide receiver and slot, obviously, but and with the Steelers running back room, there's not a lot of snaps to go around
Yeah.
unless there's an injury. But you can get creative with him, and
Yeah. Third downs, maybe, you bring him in on third down so we get the ball in space to a guy like that. But you're right. I mean, it's hard because every carry he gets is one less for Najee and Warren, and that's probably not optimal, but yeah.
we found out, I think it was yesterday, that the Steelers are bringing Michael Penix in for a visit.
Yeah.
Ron, a strange offseason just gets stranger and stranger. I mean, I get doing due diligence on quarterbacks, but he's slated early first. I mean, late first, early second.
Yeah. They only get so many visits too. So I mean, not
Yeah,
that
only 30 visits. So
I mean, they do a ton of on-sites, pro days, that kind of thing. So I guess it's not a huge critical issue to spend one on a flyer. And I think, I was thinking like sometimes they do this to get a gauge on whether this guy's really a first round, second round guy, so they know trade value wise what they want to do. But I don't know how much of that really pertains. Like, what's Penix going to know about whether someone wants to take him at the end of round one or round two?
yeah,
Bring him in for, what are they going to learn from that? Yeah, it is interesting. They're clearly not going to draft him, right? I mean, there's no
I
way
wouldn't think so.
involved with him. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe there's some trade value that they're looking at in some way, or maybe they're just interested. I don't know. It's weird. Sometimes they do this for like 3 or 4 years down the road too, right? So
Yeah, they have done that in the past. You're right.
so it's a little bit of future thinking, and they're really good with that. And it's really interesting because a lot of the guys they bring in for as free agents are guys that they played against. Uh, Almost, when a lot of the guys I spoke to, they're guys that had big games against them, and then when they're cut or didn't resign, they bring them in because they remember those games that they had against the Steelers. Penix could be like one of those guys where they want to see what he can do and they want to get to know him now. So 3 or 4 years down the road, if he doesn't cut it where he is, like a Fields, bring him in and give him a shot there. That's the only thing I could think of. But yeah, it's odd.
He apparently he killed his pro day. He ran almost a 4.40 and jumped pretty well. And
Yeah.
he's a very good quarterback. The knock on him is injuries. He's had a couple of knee surgeries and stuff. But I just don't with the state of this team and the needs they have. I can't fathom. I mean, I really can't. But then I would have said that about a lot of things that they've done this offseason. So nothing. I'm not going to say never on anything, but I think you're right to the point where they're doing their homework. Maybe 2, 3 years down the road, he becomes a free agent, or they want to make a trade for him,
Yeah.
and they have some kind of feel for him. I like him. I think
Yeah.
one of the better deep balls in this class, and decent quarterback if he can stay healthy.
I mean, if they didn't bring in Fields, I'd be more inclined to say, play Russell Wilson for a year, bring in Penix, and that makes perfect sense. But they've got Fields, so they've got that backup potential future guy. So I don't know where he would stand in all of this. Yeah, it's odd.
They,
Yeah,
yeah, it's a little bit of, it really was a strange when it came out. Um, the only other thing is they have Fields, but they don't have him signed beyond this year, and neither is Russell Wilson. So if he fell to 50, would they pull a trigger? I don't 51, whatever they pick in the second round.
yeah.
I
Uh,
don't,
it'd be tough. I mean, it would certainly give them food for thought, right? It's just you've got two guys. You're going to figure, uh, you don't do all this work to bring in both of these guys and then to draft a guy round one or two. From my perspective, but who the hell knows?
who knows, right?
Great
This off season's
offseason.
been
Yeah, yeah.
um
If they didn't have Fields, I think that makes a ton of sense.
yeah.
They got Fields, so I don't know.
While we're on the subject, I haven't spoken to you, and you haven't been on the pod in a while. What do you think about Omar's off season so far? Um,
Uh,
obviously, the quarterback stuff we like.
yeah, there's a lot of he's getting lauded for a lot of it. I'm still uncertain, right? Because a lot of these guys are guys that could be really good, like Jackson, Dante Jackson, Deshaun Elliott. These are all like pretty good guys. And I have my reservations with Queen, which I might be in the minority of. I think he's a really good inside linebacker and certainly an upgrade. I don't know if he's the second coming of Ryan Shazier by
Definitely
any means. I think he's a
Definitely
good
not.
linebacker, but he's always like in Baltimore. I even said this before free agency, before the season was over last year, that I thought Queen was overrated. And I know I want to be 100% wrong on this, but I always felt like he was this really gifted guy with a lot of athletic talent who never seemed to make the plays. And he
Yep.
was always a step behind in coverage, always like a little bit behind here and there. Um, Certainly he'll be an upgrade, which in and of itself is good, but he's the marquee signing, and outside maybe Russell Wilson. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of decent guys. You can look at it two ways from my standpoint. You can look at it, who are these guys in and of themselves individually, or you can look at it, are they upgrades from what was there before? Certainly, I think Nate Jackson's probably, or somebody Dante Jackson's an upgrade over Patrick Peterson, in his play. Elliott's an upgrade at safety. So you get that. You get upgrades. But I don't know if and sort of Cordero, is going to be a great boost to the return game, and you got a
So,
better punter in Cameron Johnson, but he's a punter, so
mhm.
uh, so they've upgraded. But these aren't like it's not like they're signing like huge name free agents they're going to make or break what's happening here. It's all going to come down to Russell Wilson's play probably anyway. But
Yeah, yeah.
uh, I don't know. It's incomplete for me. It's still incomplete for me.
I'm with you. I have a lot of questions about this offseason so far, and I'm probably a little harder than most on Omar Khan this offseason anyway. Um, we've signed 3 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks, and no offensive line. Like there is no center on this team. I
Yeah,
just I question the plan. I don't know what's going on. We
yeah,
needed a quarterback upgrade. Granted, 100% agree with that. And I think people are a little bit mesmerized by that, and have lost track of the rest of it.
yeah.
We did need a linebacker, sure, but we need a slot corner. We need a center. We need depth at all these positions. Why isn't this happening? We got a kick returner now. Is that I
I
still don't
think
I don't
I have a theory on center that when they let Cole go, that and this is, there's nothing to support it. There's no source, whatever. Uh, I have a theory that they thought they were going to sign someone and it fell through.
I believe that 100%. I
It's
do. I
really
agree with you.
odd to let Cole go and have a vacuum there of
Mhm.
nothing, right? And maybe they feel like Herbig or Daniels is better suited to be moved over than we all realize. I don't think that's a plan. I mean, they basically, and I know we talked about it offline about them saying they're going to trade for center, but we both kind of did the same thing. We
Yeah.
looked at all these. I looked at all the teams that drafted a center the past few years to see if like there's a vet behind that drafted center that is serviceable even, and I didn't see any. So
Yeah.
yeah, they pretty much there's three guys that, or maybe four, that they've got to go with in the first couple of rounds. It's Barton, it's Van Prine,
Frazier.
Frazier, and JPJ,
Yeah.
which is now people are saying he isn't all that. I don't know. So they pretty much said like they've got to go center round one or trade up in round two, or else they're SOL because centers are
Yeah.
hard to get.
It is. I mean, you bring up Mason Cole. He's probably the best free agent center on the market right now. Him and Brian Allen, who the Rams cut. I mean, Dave and I talk about this almost every podcast, and it's kind of my fault because I'm borderline obsessing with it now. But it's just Mike Tomlin comes out with this comment about how they're going to rely. He likes his offensive coordinators is going to rely on. They have the same mentality. We're going to rely on our bigs and dominate the line of scrimmage. And I'm like, I brought this up the last pod. Dominate with who exactly? You're playing your first round pick left tackle at right tackle. You don't have a center. I mean, you brought it up.
I agree, but I think it's really easy to upgrade the center position with.
Well, it's a low bar for sure, but
right. And I always look at these, there's from two different perspectives. Like I was saying earlier, like, are you upgrading, right? So are you better than you were last year with last year's guy? And if they draft really any one of those four guys, Barton, any one of those guys, they're probably a good deal better. And they weren't like horrible at the offensive line. I think we do need to right size the quality of the offensive line a bit, where I do think they were pretty good as the year progressed. They got better and better. And part of the issues they had, I mean, they did well against Buffalo, right? I think part of the issue is when your offensive line is blocking for quarterbacks that may not be awesome, it puts a lot of pressure on them because the quarterbacks are not finding guys. They're not getting rid of the ball the way they should. They're not in the right place. They're spinning out of pockets too early. That puts a lot of pressure on offensive line too. I'm not giving a ton of excuses for it other than to say it seemed to be everything seemed to be a lot better. And who thought we'd ever say this when Mason Rudolph was quarterback?
Yeah.
The running game was better. The passing game was better. The passing game being better helped the run game being better because you couldn't just keep Q on the run game anymore. People weren't afraid of Kenny Pickett. They probably weren't afraid much of Mr. Trubisky. They, Rudolph made them pay for not being afraid, right? And I think that dimension is going to help the offensive line in ways that we aren't, we won't know and you can't measure, but I think it will happen. So I think you go out, it really is an issue because they've got three key spots they got to fill. And you really can only count on doing that your first two picks. You can't count on starter round three. Maybe you get one, but you can't count on that.
Yeah, you can't count on that for sure.
So they've got to pick their poison between receiver, center, and tackle. And for me, I think they're gonna. Yeah, I know they're looking at a lot of tackles, but if they don't go some sense of center, receiver, center rounds 1 and 2, I'd be surprised.
Me as well. I looked up James Daniels' stats, and he did have 500 snaps at center in 2019 for the Chicago Bears. So it's not a big sample size, but it's significant. I mean, I guess he could play there if they decided to, if they get desperate and just sign a guard in free agency or draft a guard in the third round or play Herbig a guy. I looked at Herbig too. He's got 47 career snaps at center. So he's not, I don't think he's an answer. I don't think that's the.
Then that is a really good point because then you look at a guy like Barton, right, who's a guard but projects to center. So
he played left tackle last year.
Yeah, so and they project him inside though. And if in fact he can play center well, maybe start him off at guard. You could start him off and try to play him at center. If he struggles, you can move Daniels to center and move him to guard. Right?
Yeah,
I think that gives you some comfort there for a guy like Barton to step in. I don't think you do that with these other two guys like Frazier or whatever, but Barton seems to be a little bit more versatile in that regard.
Yep.
Uh, it's going to be interesting. I mean, the quality is a tackle, but I'm not going to say it's a luxury pick for the Steelers, but it's third on the list of.
At this point, it is because they have so many other holes. I think it is a luxury pick. I
Yeah.
mean, and if we break it down, going on a theory that the Steelers coach and general manager have been at the pro day of every first round pick in the last 20 years, blah, blah, blah. They did not go to Oregon. They did not go to Duke. And it's up in the air whether they'll go to West Virginia because it's the Big 12's doing a kind of a combo thing where they're all doing their pro days together. So they haven't showed a lot of interest in Jackson Powers Johnson. They did send their offensive line coach to Meyer to Oregon and Washington to look at. Washington's got 2 tackles that could be, early round. And then Oregon obviously has Jackson Powers Johnson. So there's that. But this is going to be an odd draft because Tomlin and Khan together have only been to 4 pro days. Yeah. Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, and Clemson. So you look at the top prospects. I have them down here. Amarius Mims, obviously, from Georgia. He's the one that's getting a lot of buzz, but he's a tackle, which great. I would love it. And then Georgia has Brock Bowers, who's a tight end. They're not going to take him. Clemson, the only first-round talent they have is Nate Wiggins, corner. Alabama has Terrion Arnold, corner. Kool-Aid McKinstry, corner. And J.C. Latham, tackle, for first-round talent. And then Michigan only has J.J. McCarthy, who's going to go in the top 10. So,
well, they have Roman, I mean, so you got
Roman Wilson too. Yeah, he could go first round.
Guys. Yeah. I'm just thinking they're looking at the second round potential. I mean, first of all, they've got 2/3. That does give them some flexibility to move up in the second round, higher in the second round, to take a guy like a Frazier who might slip out of, not slip, but he could be available, high in round 2 kind of thing. I'm not sure how much stock I'm putting in they only draft a guy if they visit their pro day in round 1. I get that's been the way.
Yeah, but it's been a 20-year sample size now.
But it's a new group.
It is,
and I think that everything's open, and I think everyone and their mother knows the Steelers need a center. So, I mean, there's you look at the roster and there literally isn't one. So, no. I mean, they're not. I mean, they've got to look at a center at some point, right? So, if the argument is they're not going to the pro day, so they're not looking at a center. I mean, we know they're taking a center.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure what that reveals when we know they're going to take a center, and they're not going to take one like in the middle rounds. We know they have to take one high unless there is some mysterious trade out there that no one can fathom. So I don't know if I worry too much about they're not going to see them, so they're not serious about taking one. We know they have to take one.
Well, it kind of eliminates Jackson Powers Johnson, although you're right. There have been reports today that maybe the league doesn't see him as highly as the media does, and maybe he isn't a first-round pick. How do you feel about Zach Frazier in the first round? I mean,
I would love to. What I could see happening is them trading down a little bit, from 20 to 25 or something, getting another pick and then moving back, using all that pick collateral to move up in round 2 to get the receiver they love or maybe even a tackle that slips, right?
Yeah.
So, and the thing that does worry me that I could see happening, though I said it's going to be center, receiver, center, I could see them going for a receiver round 3, which I would hate, honestly, because it bottoms out after mid round to late round. So unless they move up in round 2 with one of those thirds, I don't know. I could see them going center, tackle center, and playing it that way. But then the receiver position is super suspect.
It's bad. It's bad.
Yeah. So.
Yeah,
this
is unusual for a Steelers team to have major holes this close to the draft. I mean, Monday's April 1st, and I get that's a month away from the draft, but free agency's dried up. It's done. There's not for the
Yeah.
positions that the Steelers need, particularly tackle, center. There's some talent in other positions, but
It's funny because people are saying, well, they should just trade for Ayuk, but that doesn't change anything.
yeah, because you
So
have to give up your first
that's your
round
wide
pick, and you.
receiver, that's your first round pick. So now you're back to they need a tackle in the center, and they've got 1 round pick, and you're not going to get them both. And you're not going to get that starter round 3. Probably you could get Van Bryn, whatever his name is, in round 3, maybe.
Yeah, that's
Up in
you're
round,
risking a lot though.
yeah,
If you wait till round 3 and he's gone, then the bottom drops out of that position. Then you're
yeah,
really screwed.
yeah. Then you're that's a real gamble. I mean, that's
Yeah.
not a plan anymore. That's like hope is a strategy. That's not. Uh, I don't know. That just leads me to believe, even though they've been really looking at every offensive tackle there, that offensive tackle is the luxury. I just have a feeling though they're going to go for tackles because they just seem so interested in them.
It seems like it. I mean, they've had 3 or 4 offensive tackles come in for visits already. No centers, no, um, other offensive line. Obviously, don't need guards. Um, they've met with Amarius Mims. They went to the Georgia Pro Day. They're having him in for a visit. They seem to really like him.
Yeah,
If he's there at 20, I'd be shocked. And then I guess the strategy is you do whatever you can to trade up to make sure you get Zach Frazier or Graham Barton to lock that in. And then you
unless they
just,
like the other guy, unless they like the Van Prime guy, whatever. There.
yeah,
I
but
mean,
you can't,
there might not be a lot of separation in their minds between 4 and 1 in
but
terms.
you can't, like we just talked about, you can't risk. And then you want to take him in round 2, Van Pran,
Yeah.
and at 50, then yeah, I guess you could do that.
Yeah, or you drop down in round 2 a little bit, but then depending on who's there and what your read is on the draft. I mean, they do have a lot of draft collateral, so that
Yeah.
is one positive thing that they've got. They've got some maneuverability with the draft picks. They may have draft trades already lined up. Who knows? But yeah, it's concerning because we don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
The hope and expectation is they do, but it doesn't feel like it because there are 3 holes and 2 picks in rounds 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And that is alarming because again, you can't count round 3 as a solution to a starter need.
No. And a lot of people say this draft is very top heavy. Like there's talent,
Mhm.
and especially at certain positions, but then because there's not a lot of talent surrounding it, those positions are going to get eaten up pretty quickly.
He runs
And by the 3rd round, you're going to be
receiver and tackle, center to a much smaller degree because there aren't just there aren't 4 of them. Those runs are going to happen.
Yep.
And the Steelers they're not going to solve all 3 in rounds 1 and 2. In round 1 through 3. I think the 3rd round, you're going to get the bottom, you're going to get a receiver who's not much better than what you got now, or you're going to get a tackle who's a project, or you get a center who you better not rely on as your starting center year 1. None of that sounds awesome to me.
Same with me. That's why I say this, and it's funny you brought up the free agency in center because I think it did get away from them. I think they went after Mitch Morse, the Buffalo built the center of Buffalo cut, and he signed somewhere else. And I think they were spiraling after that, and then the kind of market got away from them. Was it Bradbury, the center from Denver, got paid quite a bit more than I think they wanted to pay. So I think that got away from them a little bit.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I think that, and I don't know. I remember is it Cameron? Who's the guy who's hurt? The center that's
I was going to bring him up next. The only other guy is Connor Williams.
Yeah, Connor Williams. Yeah,
from Miami, who is a terrific center, but apparently he had a really, really, catastrophic knee injury last year. And according to his agent, he was contemplating retiring for a little while. And his agent also said that they're not even talking to teams until they figure out where he's at health wise. They're probably going to wait till after the draft to start. I don't think you can leave your eggs in a basket of a center who's teetering on retirement.
No, there's no way. That's the guy that if the draft pick doesn't work out and you're struggling to figure out what to do, you bring him in, kind of guy. In your bye week, some kind of plan. So yeah, it's just I think. I mean, my personal preference is go center than wide receiver. Just lock those things down. You can get a really good center round 1. There's going to be tons of quality wide receivers round 2 available to you. Go that route, solve those 2 things, deal with tackle another year. Look, Moore is serviceable. I know people don't love him, but you know what? They went to the playoffs and almost won against Buffalo
Yeah.
with him at that tackle and with a really subpar center and subpar passing game. So, you know, let's see what they got. Give them one more year, get your tackle solution. Good thing about tackles is you could probably plug them in pretty quickly too. You move Jones over, then you move it, draft a tackle as a right tackle. That stuff is all really doable. That would be my course of action, is just lock down these 2 things that you can lock down.
I think they have to. The only way I think I might differ with you, or the team might, because I agree with you, is they might wait on wide receiver. I have a feeling it's going to be tackle, center, and then wide receiver in the 3rd round, or maybe they trade up a little bit. It's scary because, like you said, there is the number 2 wide
Not
receiver.
all the mock drafts. Yeah, I mean, but it's funny because I played around the mock draft stuff a lot, and that's not real life, and I get that. But every time you do it, all the receivers are gone by the 3rd round pick, and you can move up to round 3, and there's still like it's the guys that are left. It's not the guys that
Yes.
And this isn't. We're not looking for a 3rd or 4th here. They're looking for a starter.
Yep.
That's look, they brought in a lot of guys. All those guys are 3 or 4, number 3, number 4 type wide
at best. Yep, at best. Yep.
So
I mean, I don't know. Maybe they like, Van Jefferson better than we do. Didn't he play for the Atlanta last year, and maybe they think he's a 2. I don't know, man.
I think these are all guys that are 3s and 4s that maybe start off as a 2 for the first little bit while the rookie gets acclimated, kind of thing. But they're not guys that you don't want those guys starting.
No. I have a theory about this offseason too. And what worries me is I see Mike Tomlin's fingerprints on these signings a lot. We know how much he loved Patrick Queen. We know, and we know how much he loved Dante Jackson, even though the rest of the league, I don't think, feels that way. I don't think you get a lot of people saying he's not really a number 2 corner. He's barely a number 2 corner. How much of this is Mike Tomlin driven, and is that a good thing?
I don't think. Look, I don't think that's how they operate. I think that certainly he's there and has a say in it. I don't think they operate that way when it comes to free agency and the draft. I think it is really a group discussion. Because he's not out scouting these guys. He doesn't know, so they have scouts who are out there, and their job is to evaluate a Dante Jackson, to evaluate the Deshaun Elliott's. I don't think it took Mike Tomlin liking Patrick Queen for them to know Patrick Queen was the best inside linebacker available, right? As an example. Yeah. And the scouts also see him 2 times a year in person playing against the Steelers, right? So I do think that with these guys that it's not, I don't think it's Mike Tomlin's fingerprint on it. I think he's supportive of it, but I don't think he's saying, look, this is the guy I want to ride with. I think they're saying, look, they liked Jackson last year, and that was through this. That was not just Tomlin. They liked him last year. The scouts liked him. They liked some part of his game, right? So I just think that this is not just a Mike Tomlin thing. I think this is them saying these are guys we like across the board. I think that's how they operate.
I just harken back to last year and the Patrick Peterson signing. That was another one of Mike Tomlin's guys he loved. Yeah. And they signed him. It was kind of a disaster. And I think this Dante Jackson thing could head in that same direction. I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched a lot of Dante Jackson play football. I'm just going about what I hear from other people. He struggled to be a number 2 corner. He had kind of an off season last year. He had a torn hamstring the year before that, I guess. So that's an issue too for a 29-year-old corner coming, 1 year removed from a hamstring injury. I don't know.
Well, I think they also, they've got youth there. I'm not saying that you can count on a Darius Rush or Corey Trice or Luke Barku or those guys, but I think they feel like they've got some guys there that they can work with. And look, the Steelers, every team, they have their evaluations of their guys that we never know about, right?
Yeah.
So they may be looking at Corey Trice, and they may already feel like they know what they got with him. They might look at Rush and think that Rush probably not, because he didn't get a lot of playing time. So they actually reduced that a little bit, but I think that they know what they've got, and I think it's a group decision to bring in a guy like Jackson. I think it's just a guy they like. We may not agree with it. They get stuff wrong and teams get stuff wrong, but I think
particularly for Deontay Johnson, that was a killer.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the depth on this team a little bit too. I tweeted this out today, and I'm concerned. I mean, I'm really concerned. Let's start with we're talking cornerback. I looked it up today. You've got, outside of the two starters, JPJ and Dante Jackson, you have 38 total NFL snaps at cornerback on the roster. And that's all Darius Rush. Luke Bark, who doesn't have any, and obviously Trice got injured and he missed the entire season. You don't have a slot corner right now. So I looked at our lads today. They had Darius Rush as the starting slot corner right now because they couldn't plug anybody else in there. So
I think they'll probably bring a guy like Sullivan back, or
this is where
they have Riley. They do have Elijah Riley.
Yeah.
And he played in the slot. I think he did play some snaps. So
I didn't even look him up. You're right. I forgot about that. He did play some slot.
And I don't think he was extremely effective, but it's a guy you can plug in there. But I do think that slot corner is like a guy you can find late. Teams make a lot of cuts. Remember, this is like the first wave of free agency. We also have to remember. So there's going to be a lot of cuts. There's going to be corners who you can plug in, like a Mollett. Like, Mollett wasn't anyone we knew this time of year when he first had them. Sullivan the same. So they'll bring in these guys. I'm less worried about the slot corner. Not that it's not an important part of what they need to do, but you can also get those guys mid rounds. You can get that one of those third round picks could easily be your slot corner. That guy from Michigan that everyone loves, or someone like that.
Yeah, Sandstrill.
And it is a deep corner class. And it's a deep corner class of guys that there's a lot of guys that fit that slot mold.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'm less worried about the slot because I just feel like there's a lot of options out there to fill that, to resolve that. Not that you take it for granted, but I feel like those options are there.
All right. So then we flip to linebacker, and it's Mark Robinson's the only healthy backup, and we know how we feel about him because they tried every warm body under the sun to avoid playing him last year. They signed a bunch of guys. You've got Holcomb, but the injury thing, we don't know where he is, when he'll be back.
They've got guys like Blake Martinez on the practice squad.
They still have him, or do they?
Yeah,
I think he retired.
He's a free agent again.
Yeah,
but I think those are guys that I also don't worry about as much. And I hear you. And right now it's a need, but I think a lot of teams have these kinds of needs where you're looking for your third or fourth guy. And so I worry less about that because I feel like they've got a ton of draft picks. Free agency is rife with these, backup linebacker kind of guys. Those guys are easy to find. I'm not saying that you take it for granted, but they are easy to find. If Holcomb isn't healthy, if Roberts gets hurt, or if Queen gets hurt, by the time a Roberts or a Queen gets hurt, Holcomb's probably gonna be healthy. Hopefully.
You hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they'll, and again, they could draft a guy too. So I feel like there's plenty of time to fix that. And again, the second wave of free agency, there's, I worry about that deep part. It's got to get done. It has to get done, but I don't.
How good is it going to be? That's my problem. Like, how good is it going to be when it gets done? Is my question. How far are we from Chandon Sullivan, Patrick Peterson, Mason Cole, and Marcus Golden all being back on this roster?
Well,
as the depth guys,
they'll be back as depth, not starter guys, right?
Yeah.
So that's your difference, right? So if Patrick Peterson's your slot guy, you take that. If Mason Cole's your backup center, you take that. I mean, I don't have issues with that. It's the fact that they were starting that was pain. And you're not going to have Hall of Fame or All Pro guys behind other guys. It's
I just don't ever remember it being this bad. Again, tackle Who's your third tackle?
I have a guy. I'm trying to remember who it is.
It's
Yeah, they probably. Yeah, you're right. I mean, they need depth there, but and they probably. My guess is they're taking the tackle. Round.
Dylan Cook is probably their best.
Yeah, they have Devery Henderson, someone like that too. They have a couple guys that are like depth guys, but you're right. They need. But I do think that's they take a guy around three who could be a swing tackle, and they sign a guy in free agency. There's still a lot of time for that stuff, and I'm
Yeah.
not. It's got to. I keep it saying it's got to get done, but it's April. It's not even April yet. So I don't worry about them being able to find a swing backup tackle or your fourth linebacker or stuff like that. I want them to find a fourth outside linebacker too, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to roll with Nate Herbig as your only backup. He's a little undersized. He's going to get worn down. And you need two anyway. So, bring Golden back or, someone like that. Yeah, that has to be filled. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be filled, but they've got time for that.
But Dupree, maybe.
I don't think
Possibly.
Dupree's the guy, even though he would love to be back, he said. Because this guy's going to play his teams. They got to play special teams.
Yeah,
And
true.
sure
That's a good
Bud
point.
Dupree is a special teams guy.
No, he's past that, I believe.
Yeah.
You interviewed him recently. How was that?
It was great. He's a good guy. I mean, he's
Yeah.
you know the way he talked about things. Injuries just the injury really came at the worst possible time, which is true. Just he's about to get a big contract year. What I never loved about Bud Dupree's play is it always seemed to escalate and get really good right at the right contract time for him. And I think he's a really good player. He'll be a really good backup if we didn't need him for the teams. But great guy. Good leader, like a serious, like great locker room guy. He's a leader. He was a leader in high school. I mean, he was doing all kinds of leadership, taking leadership roles on since high school. So he's a great locker room guy, great guy. Interesting guy.
I want to wrap up a couple more pro day stuff. Andy Weidel was at LSU, which is interesting. They've got some talent. Mason Smith is a big defensive tackle, 6'5".
Yeah.
That's a name to keep an eye on. And
I've heard him compared to Tuitt.
yeah, he has been compared to Tuitt. As far as size, play we'll have to wait and see. But they also have Brian Thomas Jr., who I would just absolutely love in the first round. I mean, I get there's so many other needs on this team, but boy, this wide receiver too is.
I don't love that. I still think they need not Deontay Johnson, but a receiver who's elusive, who can create separation more than a guy like Pickens does. You've got the Pickens guy, and I think Brian Thomas is a little bit more in that mold of Pickens.
Yeah,
I think you need a guy who's like the worthy guy, or someone that Leggett, or someone who's really elusive to create separation. You don't want, not every ball. I always go back to this thing that this one scout said, that Chuck Noll said, which was the scout was like pushing for this wide receiver. He said he makes all these great contested catches in college. He was really great. He would out jump all these corners and make all these great catches. And Noll was just like, give me the guy who gets open. And that's like, yeah, I feel that, right? Like, it's great that Pickens is there. He's going to be a cornerstone receiver for this team. But give me a guy who gets open too, like more so than Pickens does.
That's a good point. It's something different than Pickens.
Yeah.
We brought up Roman Wilson earlier. Maybe in the second round, he'd be that type of guy. We've heard Malachi Corley a lot.
Yeah, he's a fun player, Corley. Though.
Yep.
I don't know how much separation he creates, right? I have no idea. I get the sense that he's a physical dude. He's almost like a Debo or almost like a Cordell Patterson kind of mold in a way, smaller, but in that kind of more physical, some burst kind of mold. But yeah,
would you give up a first round pick for Brandon Ayuk if that was the
not in this draft? Not in this draft, because you can get a Brandon Ayuk in the first round in this draft without having to pay him Brandon Ayuk money.
Maybe
Ayuk is a really good wide receiver.
Yeah,
he's not Jerry Rice. I mean,
no. He's the thing about him is he's 25. He's about to enter his prime, and he's had some fantastic seasons for the 49ers. As far as available guys that you could get, I don't think there's any better than that. I mean, you're not getting Jordan Jefferson. You're not getting some of the other top 9 guys. I think he'd fit perfectly. I think Yeah, you have to pay him. That's the other issue. Like
Yeah,
he
that's the
wants
thing.
20 million per season, which is
Yeah,
kind
in a
of a
different draft, if let's say wide receiver was the one thing you needed, and the draft was kind of light on receivers, yeah, you make that trade. I don't think they need to make that trade for him for a one. If it's a two, now you got me thinking, but not for a one. They can get a receiver that's really good and maybe, frankly, is a little bit more of what they need. They need like a yards after the catch kind of guy. They need like a short. They need a guy who can take a short pass and do some interesting things. Within the 10 yards of the line of scrimmage kind of guy, or an open field. That's not Ayuk. Yeah, Ayuk is more like a Pickens kind of guy, I think.
well,
Um,
he's got a little bit of run after catch too. He's not,
yeah,
I'd
but he's
say
more
he's
physical than elusive. I that's my take on it.
yeah. I mean that's fair.
And I
Um
think they need like a Roman Wilson, or I think Deontay complemented Pickens really well. He just didn't do
yeah.
it well, if that makes sense.
Didn't do it well enough, often enough. Like
Yes.
he had his moments, but
But you get a guy like Roman Wilson or Corley or one of these guys that could really do some fun stuff after the catch. That's what they want. That's what
Lad
the
McConkey is another one that's a short, fast, quick
yeah.
guy that maybe in the second round you could get. Yeah, I get your point where, and then again, you know, they want to use a lot of 12 personnel this year. How much are they going to rely on two wide receivers? Is that a priority for them? Or are they going to try to do this Pickens and company and run two tight ends a lot?
So here's the thing for you. Once they do go tight end round one, get Brock Bowers.
If I was, I've thought about it a lot. If Brock Bowers is there at 20, which he probably won't be, I would pull the trigger. I would, because you could
That
use
would,
him as a slot, just a weapon,
yeah.
and I've always thought the Steelers needed one of those guys. That's just, don't classify him. He's a weapon. You put him,
But I
you
do
know,
think Connor Hayward can fill that role, right?
yeah, at a much lesser level, but yeah,
I think he's actually. I think they under you. I mean, and I get why. There's only so many
yeah,
places to put the ball, and you've got Fryermuth. But I think he and Fryermuth together. I could see Hunter Hayward in an Arthur Smith offense as your second tight end. And I know you got Washington there too, so you got three really good tight ends. I could see them playing around with Hayward a bit because he's big like a tight end, but a little bit of speed and elusiveness like a receiver. I'm not saying he's super, in that area, but I think he's an interesting hybrid kind of weapon that I could see them using more.
yeah. Pat Fryermuth's interesting. He's going into the last year of his contract, correct?
Yeah.
This will be his last year. To this point, they haven't re-signed him, extended him. His blocking hasn't always been his greatest strength. I wonder how he fits in the Arthur Smith offense. I wonder if they're thinking past Pat Fryermuth. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I don't know. Again, I mean, if this put it this way, my thinking is this: if tight end was a real option for them, and they were really thinking of pursuing that in the draft, I think they would have shored up these other spots more.
Yeah,
You
that's a good
can't
point.
not deal with these other spots. And now, what looks, when you have three tight ends on your roster, which one you just invested in last year, a third round pick, I don't think that, you know, I don't think that you don't shore up those other spots knowing tight end's a big option for you round one.
It's that old argument: need versus best player available. If he's there at 20,
Yeah,
he's most likely best player available.
he is, but there's a lot of receivers who I think are probably comparable on the skill level as Bowers is. It's a super high level, draft for receivers and probably a tackle. I mean, the problem with centers is they are like 1A versus the receivers and the tackles that will probably be there at their pick. But it's so much more of an overwhelming need.
Yeah. Yep. One last thing. I noticed Aaron Curry's been at a lot of, I think, 3 or 4 pro days now. Are they going to draft a linebacker too?
Well,
Then,
yeah, I mean, I think they need an inside, like to your point earlier, they need depth there.
but
I
then
definitely think they will.
we're running out of like, we need a receiver, we need a corner, we need a tackle, we need
He
a center.
deserves the fourth round, fifth round. I
Yeah, I
mean,
guess. I
maybe one of
guess.
those third round picks. I think the way I could see this going is center, receiver, tackle, corner.
You forgot wide receiver.
No,
Did you say
send up
what?
the receiver,
All right,
tackle, corner, and then
linebacker.
backer and defensive line.
Yeah, they need.
Yeah.
You could argue they need to get a defensive lineman in this draft too.
So they got Lowry. They just signed Lowry,
Yep, and they
who's
got
a quality
Loudermilk, and they've got
rotation guy.
yeah Benton, and they got so they're pretty good there.
Yeah, I think they're fine. And Hayward's healthy now, who will be healthy, I would say. So, and that's a big deal. I mean, people I think are underestimating how big of a deal it will be if he's 100%.
Yep. What do they do with him? Are they going to extend him? They're going to do something with that contract and that cap hit. I think they're going to have to.
I don't know. Does he want to play more years too? I mean, I would say give him like a 2-year extension, and
thin that cap hit out a little bit and see how it goes. I forget his number, but it's a very high cap number, and they've spent money. I mean, they spent $3 million on a punter. They spent, Cordero Patterson came in at $3 million per season, which was surprising.
Yeah, and Queen is
Queen. So their cap space is starting to dwindle.
Yeah, they've got moves they can make, to your point, with Hayward and some other guys that they can extend or play around with. So they've got room to play around. It's just to what end? Like there's no one to sign right now. This is all draft right now. It's all about and it's about the draft and having a little bit of extra space to sign some of those backup free agents that you're talking about.
All right, let's wrap this up with gun to your head. First 3 picks, what positions?
I'd say center, receiver, tackle.
As we stand today, I think they're going to go tackle, center, receiver. I just think they're locked into tackle for some reason. And, we know the reason. It's Dan Moore, but it just if that day 1 picks a center, then we're going to be all very nervous that they don't whiff on us. They'd almost have to trade up at that point.
I think I'm nervous if they go center round 1. I'm nervous about the
wide receiver. Yeah,
if they take a wide receiver round 3, I think it's going to be a mistake. I do think maybe they're devaluing the wide receiver spot. Maybe they feel like, but they are looking at a lot of receivers. I mean, they're bringing them in. They are looking at receivers. So. I don't know. I think my hope is that it's center, receiver, tackle.
If I had my druthers, I think I'd go wide receiver, center, tackle, because I think they need a wide receiver that badly.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot of really good ones around and maybe they trade up in round 2, whatever. But
I was just thinking that maybe they trade up for the receiver, or they get, who knows?
Yeah,
it's a lot. There's a lot that could still happen. This team's by no means done this offseason. Who knows what kind of surprises we could have?
Yeah, I just don't think there's any. To what you're saying earlier, there's not many free agents left that are difference makers. They need some depth. That'll be great if they can sign some depth guys, but. There's no one at the center, receiver, tackle spot that is a solution to what ails the most right now.
I've gone over that center free agent list a dozen times. It's just not there. It's Mason Cole. I hate to say it, and his play dropped off so dramatically last year. I don't think you can revisit that, even as a backup. Yeah. I don't know if I want Mason Cole
as a backup. I would be fine. I mean,
at that point, just go get a guard and make Herbig the backup center. See if there's a guard free agency that you can.
I don't know. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I mean,
he couldn't snap. He couldn't. He had a rough end of the season.
He did. And
then before we go, what's your confidence level in Pat Meyer? I don't
know. I'm
not a fan.
I don't know how to evaluate it, because when the defense knows what you're going to do, and they're not afraid of your quarterback, I mean, how do you evaluate any of that?
That's a good point. Mean,
it's like I almost think the fact that they're able to have some success at times in the running game, despite all that shit, is compliment. And he did change. I remember talking to a guy a couple of years ago. He changed the way they were blocking. As an example, one of the things he changed was usually, at least some of the guys were saying, usually when you're at play tackle, you step back on a pass play because and you receive the pass
Mhm.
rush, so to speak. He had them aggressively stepping into the pass rusher. Like he wanted them to be more aggressive, on passing downs, and that's a big change for guys and other things that he was changing as well. So I think that takes a little bit of time for some of those guys to adjust to. There's also a lot of new faces on the line. I think no matter what, I think we're going to see a different team second half or the last 3 quarters of the season than we will the first quarter of the season. The first quarter of the season is going to probably be a little rough. There's
Yeah,
a lot of new faces,
agreed.
a lot of new coaching on offense. They're going to have to figure shit out. So I
Yeah,
think it might, what we see the first 4 weeks will not be what we see the last 4 weeks, hopefully.
that's a good point. I just to Pat Myers, I can't think of a wide receiver, an offensive lineman who's improved since he took over. I just there everyone else seems to have gone the other way.
I don't
And
know. Siamalo, I thought played well. I thought he actually got better as the season went on. Daniels has been steady. Uh,
steady.
Moore has been, he's decreased. I thought Jones was okay. I mean, it's hard to say year one. So,
Kevin Dotson leaves and has a phenomenal
but
season.
Dotson was not about his play. Dotson, there was a personality issue because remember they benched him because they didn't like there's something about his persona that they didn't like. It had
Yeah,
nothing to
it's
do
it's
with his
odd.
blocking. It was the mental errors. It was stuff like that. I don't think it had anything to do with his blocking as much as it did the errors that he was making. And I think for some reason, it was a Tomlin couldn't deal with it. Tomlin did not
Yeah,
like it. It wasn't. It was something there.
it takes a lot to get in his doghouse, but once you're there, man, will we ever find out what happened with Chooks
Well,
and why
Chuck
he
said
never?
that he wanted. Didn't he say that we should just take a knee on every snap and pretty much quit, and that was it?
That's the thing that gets you benched the entire rest of the season. Like we always hear about Mike Tomlin respecting the veterans and not trying to step on veterans' toes, and that comment gets him benched for the rest of the season.
It's a lot for a football player to say we should quit
Yeah,
to your
I get
teammates in
it.
the middle of the game. I think that's for a team that prides itself first and foremost on being uber competitive, right? And that's the thing that it worries me about this whole offensive scheme is it's this will to win
Yeah,
shit.
we've been talking about this for 2 years, right, Ron? It's this. This is not going to work. I just
I
you're not
think
going to out physical teams on a regular basis and be successful. It's
Yeah, I
just
think it's going to have to, like, I was going back and forth today on this on social media. It's going to have to come down to the physical leading to the big plays, right? It's going to have to be play action's going to have to be a real thing, not this really cool idea that was been played out for 2 years that never came to fruition in the offense. It's going to have to be a real thing where play action is going to have to buy big plays. Then it makes sense. But to just say we're going to impose our will on you all the time, that's arrogance. I think that if there is an
yeah.
intent to use that physicality to do other things, I'm more, I feel better about that. I don't know what the intention is right now.
Yeah. I immediately thought of you when I read that comment of we're going to dominate with our bigs and like here we go again with this shit. We're going to be you know running Najee up the middle 4 times a game. Every it's just
Yeah.
it's arrogance. I really think that's a great way to put it. I think it's Tomlin's there. I think he really believes he can win on defense and an offense that just doesn't turn the ball over and is physical and
Yeah.
it's it's
And what's
1982
crazy,
all over.
what's crazy too is that if you're going to win on defense, I think they have a really good defense. I don't think the defense is that good. Like Dante
No,
Jackson, I don't have an issue bringing Dante Jackson in, but you didn't bring in
yeah,
like a shutdown.
L'Jarius Sneed. You make a move like
Right.
that, then
Right.
okay,
If
then
that's
you
what you're going to do, then that's what you do.
yeah.
So, and Deshaun Elliott's a solid but unspectacular safety.
Mhm.
So you're not bringing in if your goal is to say we're going to dominate an offense with the running game, hit a few big plays, and have a super dominant defense. Well, that defense, I don't care what anyone says, it's really good. It's not super dominant though.
Yeah. Yeah, if that's the way you want to play, the first thing you do is sign a center. And the second thing you do is acquire L'Jarius Sneed no matter what the cost, because that he's a Pro Bowl corner.
Yeah.
That gives you almost two, if you JPJ continues to improve, you have two Pro Bowl corners. Then maybe you're teetering on a really dominant defense.
Yeah.
And your offensive line is in place. Then you can draft, pieces to go along with that. They've gone a weird route. And I like the Justin Fields thing, and I like Russell Wilson. I don't know who's going to end up. It's probably going to be Russell Wilson, the star, and then we'll see from there. Part of me really wants to see what Justin Fields can do in this.
Well, preseason, they'll give him plenty of snaps in preseason. Yep. So, I mean, the thing with him is it's always been turnovers. And he was really awful in the fourth quarter, which is a big alarm to me. Like, crunch time, he was really bad a lot of the time.
I just remember the few Chicago Bears games that I watched, they just ran that poor kid into the ground. Like, I distinctly remember a game where he had a hurt wrist or shoulder, and they called like 3 quarterback draws in a row. It's like they ran him into the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think there's some truth to like him playing behind Wilson, learning from Wilson, getting better groomed than he was in Chicago and Pittsburgh. I think there is probably some truth to that. In giving him a real chance to learn.
He's got to clean up the turnovers, though. Tomlin will go absolutely insane.
Yeah, which is why I was surprised that there was so much love for him, because that's the one thing that Tomlin hates, and that's the one thing that Fields, above and beyond anything else, was doing most, was just making a lot of mistakes. And again, what's really interesting is the one thing Pickett did really well was he had those fourth quarter. He did well in the fourth quarter. Fields is the antithesis of that.
Yeah. Yeah, he really is. I know we're going long here, but what's your take on the Kenny Pickett thing? I'm really down on him requesting a trade, kind of running from competition a little bit.
I don't think he ran from competition. I get the optics there. I think he was just pissed. I think he was pissed. I think he felt like he was never given a really fair chance. That, first he was under Canada sucked, then he got hurt, then people came in and replaced him when he was just starting to find some rhythm. Then they bring in Russell Wilson and tell him he can compete, but Wilson's in the driver's seat. So I think he just was like, you know what, this is bullshit. I'm tired of this. I do find it odd that he went to Philadelphia, where there is a quarterback that's much more cemented in a starter. And barring injury, he's not going to sniff the starting job there.
Yeah.
So
I don't get it.
I think he let his emotions get the best of him. And I got shit for this last year when I was watching him on the sidelines. And he looked pissed. Even when they're doing well, he looked like he
didn't handle that well at all at the end of the season. Not at all.
I thought he looked really like this, like he was like swallowing shit, right? It just made it look, he did not look happy. And, I just think he felt like he was given a raw deal, and he probably was a little bit. But you know what? He didn't help himself either by playing remotely well.
Yeah.
So
this is not John Elway. I mean, you haven't earned anything.
Yeah.
You take your lumps and compete. That's my thing. I mean, yes, you were the number 1 pick, and you were supposed to be the starter, and you've had some bad luck. You had Matt Canada, you had some injuries. Fine, but that's no reason to, take your ball and go home and say, trade me. That speaks to his character a little bit to me. Yeah. I mean, what would you rather compete with? Almost, a late 30s quarterback or Jalen Hurts?
I don't think he's competing with Jalen Hurts.
That's true. He's not. There's no competition there.
There's no competition there. He is a backup quarterback now. He is not a quarterback for a starting spot.
Does he just shoot his way out of Pittsburgh and figure, I'm not going to start in Pittsburgh or Philly? At least I'm out of Pittsburgh, and then I'm a free agent after the year.
That's why I think this wasn't thought through on his part, because he's got a contract. He's not like a free agent next year. He's not one and done in Philly. He's stuck there for a little bit. Hurts is there for the long term, unless he and his agent have a read, because there is some dissension in Philly with Hurts, and Hurts is, they're starting to question him like Dak Prescott, right? So
Mm.
maybe there's this feeling like, well, if Hurts does really start stumbling and people start really getting on him, maybe Pickett will get a chance. I'm not seeing that,
Yeah, I'm
but
not seeing it either.
because he also has the issue there is Pickett still has to play well and show that he's got
Yeah.
he's got the worthiness to replace Hurts. They're not going to just replace him with some dude. He's got to show that he's better, even if Hurts isn't playing great. So, and that's the one thing that I think Pickett is not fully embracing. I think there's probably a lot of victimization. He's the victim in all of this. And there's a little bit of truth to that, but there's also, he played poorly all on his own, outside of all the other variables that were true, but still, you look at the tape, there's a lot of other shit that happened that had nothing to do with Canada, and nothing to do with an offensive line, and nothing to do with anything else but him not playing well. And I'm not sure he fully accepts that. Again, I don't know. I'm not there with him, but it just feels to me like that's the case.
Yeah, I mean that's the most logical conclusion you can come to is that he just thinks he's better than he is, or he's gotten a raw deal, and hey, life's not fair. I mean, you're a pro athlete. It's about competition. You have to perform. This is not nothing's handed to you, especially like you said, he struggled so much in his career. He's played so badly and he became injury prone towards the end. What do you expect? The Steelers are going to bring in competition.
Yeah.
I was honestly, if you had asked me like the day after the season, I would have never guessed that they brought this kind of competition in. I thought
Right.
the competition was going to be Mason Rudolph. I mean, I don't know how many times I told Dave it's going to be, Ryan Tannehill and Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph and Kenny
I thought it'd
Pickett.
be like a Tannehill kind of guy, and like a journeyman who could. And I'm happy it's not, because I think Wilson gives you a real chance. I don't. I'm not a big believer in Tannehill's ability
No,
to
Tannehill's done.
But I do believe that Wilson has that whatever it is. You can win with him. And I think that Pickett would have done well to learn behind a guy like Wilson. So
Yeah. Yeah,
Hurts, I'm not
absolutely.
sure I think Hurts is the kind of guy who's going to be really watching his own back a little bit
Yeah.
and keep that job. Wilson is the kind of guy that I think would be happy to groom. He already reached out to Field saying, "Hey, excited to have you here."
Yeah,
You know,
you see a lot of that with him. Is he seems to be a real team guy, although he's hasn't been the most popular guy in the room in a couple of his stops. I know that there was a lot of
yeah.
chatter out of Seattle that they were glad to see him go. I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of players who talked him up too, though. I mean, so
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what I think the issue with him is just a weird dude, and
yeah.
that some people just don't have a like
he,
him,
well,
right?
he's a very strange character. I mean, some of the stuff he puts out on social media and the whole life being a pop star and then
Yeah,
showing up at all these Hollywood stuff. It's going to be interesting. We haven't had a player like him as a quarterback in a long time, So not that
yeah,
he's like off the field, going to give you, get in trouble with the law or anything like that. But he's just, like you said, a strange
yeah,
character.
yeah.
This is going to be interesting.
It's gonna be a fun season.
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
maybe fun isn't the word. It's gonna be an interesting season. Really
I
interesting.
told Dave, wait till he throws his first interception and people start screaming for Justin Fields.
Yeah,
This has the potential to be like, especially on social media, it's going to be insane.
yeah.
Because now you have two legitimate quarterbacks. They're basically even when you factor in the age and everything else. I mean,
I still, look, I don't feel like Fields is a legitimate starting quarterback right now.
you don't, huh?
I don't.
He
That's
definitely struggled a
like,
lot.
look, if we're holding Pickett to the fire, saying he did
Yes.
not play well enough,
Yep.
then why are we doing it differently for Fields?
He's got
Fields,
that added running ability that
yeah,
kind
but he's
of.
also got that added ability to throw a ton of interceptions.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I mean, I don't know. I don't see him as being right now in his career much better than Pickett was. I mean, talent wise, yes. I mean,
Talent wise,
athleticism,
it's not
talent-wise.
close. Yeah. Yes.
But in performance, which is where it all comes down to, he wasn't any better.
No, you're right.
So
You're right.
what there's a lot of flash and excitement to his style of play, but it doesn't boil down to performance. So I don't know.
Yeah, to your point earlier, you couldn't pick more different quarterbacks than Justin Fields and Kenny Pickett. I mean, everything that Kenny Pickett excelled at, Justin Field does, and Kenny Pickett never turned the ball over. was sometimes clutch in the fourth quarter, where Justin Fields turns the ball over a lot,
Yeah.
not so clutch. So we'll see.
Yeah, that fourth
Uh,
quarter thing is a worry to me
it
because
is.
that's something you just have to be able to do in this league, and that's something he's really struggled with.
I don't want to make excuses, but Chicago is such a dumpster fire. Like they've been so bad,
Yeah,
so it's hard to judge. And people, my feelings on Kenny Pickett. I really didn't like him. I didn't like when they drafted him. But when people come to me and say, he had Matt Canada as offensive coordinator, it's hard to push back on that because
it
it's
is.
true.
Yeah,
And Matt Canada was epically bad at being an offensive coordinator, like historically bad.
yeah,
So, and if you're going to make that excuse for Kenny Pickett, then you got to give Justin Fields a little bit of slack too. I don't know. It's going to be fun.
yeah.
Like you said, it's going to be really interesting how the season goes.
It's not over yet. This draft, I mean, you know, I am excited because I think at some point they're going to bring in a really fun wide receiver. I think they have to, and that'll be fun. So, yeah, I think this will be. I do think with a guy like Russell Wilson, what we do also get with a guy like Russell Wilson is a veteran quarterback who I know it's pound and ground, and all that stuff, but you got a guy who's going to get the ball downfield, who's not going to be checked down Charlie all the time.
No,
You got a guy who's going to try to make plays.
George Pickens is going to love him. He's going to
Yeah, I
absolutely
think
love
so
him.
too. I think and that's the one thing I do like about Wilson is that he's a guy who really wants and tries to make plays as opposed to settling for the check down and being okay punting because punting's part of the game, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I don't think that's who Russell Wilson is, and I think that makes this offense exciting. It also makes it a little bit dangerous because you turn the ball over sometimes. But
He,
I
he
think
holds the
that,
ball a little too long and he can get sacked a lot. But
yeah,
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 I told Dave last week this is a as high a variance possibilities of what could happen this year. They could go really far in the playoffs, or they could go really bad this
yeah.
season. And I have no idea how it's going to go. I don't.
Well, the one thing is, I do think the perception is that Tomlin is getting what he needs, and provided they solve the receiver and center problem, which I think in one form or fashion they will. So there's a lot of pressure I think that's going to be on Tomlin because look, he's got his quarterback, he's got his linebacker. He's got the pieces in place, barring injuries again, and
Yeah.
the excuse on injuries. He's got the pieces if they solve center and receiver, which I can't believe they won't. Uh, so there's a lot of pressure on Tomlin then.
I was just going to say there's added pressure on him that losing in the first round again is not going to cut it.
No,
If
not at
if
all.
if everything stays relatively healthy and people injuries happen all the time, so one or two you can't give them slack for. Um, if Russell Wilson survives the whole season and they go one and done, yeah, this is going to be a lot of pressure.
I agree, and
I wonder how they approach his contract this year.
I think they'll extend him. I do,
Yeah,
but there has to be real change, and that's what worries me. Like I was saying earlier, how much is this offense really going to change? Theoretically, like in terms of like how it's approaching what it wants to do. It's not changing a lot in terms of the driving theory behind what it's trying to do, which is to run the ball hard, be a power offense. And the thing that will hopefully change is the reliance and expectation of bigger plays and more of those big plays.
yeah,
I think that's where you're going to see the play action, Wilson's scrambling ability, all that stuff. If this offense is going to succeed, if this team's going to win, it's going to come down to big plays on offense based off of some success in the running game.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why they settled on Arthur Smith so quick because he runs the style of offense that Mike Tomlin likes. That was a
Right.
seamless, easy choice for them.
Yeah, that
I
was a
know,
Tomlin pick. Yeah.
yeah. He saw Arthur Smith as exactly what he wants. That Tennessee
Extension of his
offense.
philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah, that Tennessee offense from a couple of years ago is exactly what Mike Tomlin wants to do to the
100%.
T. Yeah.
100%.
All right, Ron, I appreciate you coming on
Yeah.
tonight.
That's
We'll
good
have
stuff.
to have you on more often. You got anything to plug before you get out of here?
Got interviews with a few Steelers coming out. Cameron Johnston, the punter. Got Denzel Mims. Got Kalen Barnes, who is the fastest guy on the Steelers team. So it'll be,
Oh, interesting.
He's ran a 4.23.
Wow, I didn't
Yeah,
know that.
4.23. Yeah, he's a track athlete. And the story behind why he became a track athlete it will be really fun to read.
Okay, cool.
So that'll be the Barnes will be up on Monday. So
Denzel Mims too, huh? That must have been interesting. He's had quite a path to the NFL so far.
he
All right,
has,
great.
certainly an up and down. He's got a lot to prove, and he knows it. So
Excellent. All right, until next time, thanks for listening to the Steelers Sanctuary podcast. Thanks again, Ron.
yeah, thank you. It's good seeing you.